Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Dietrich.
And we, at long last, have this episode underway. Ginny has been having a little bit of a tough time getting going this morning.
Saying her name. I can't even say my name. I'm glad I got it out there. Jeez.
Yes. For some reason, you thought your name was incredibly funny. I don't think your name is that funny. So
it's not that funny. I'm just I'm having a time right now.
Well, it's probably because we're going to talk about accounting today, right?
Oh yeah, let's talk about accounting.
That's what I had. I had in my notes. Accounting. Did I have the wrong notes?
Really fun. I think you meant accountable.
Oh, accountable. Oh, so that's different. That's not the same. So, see, I thought we were talking about P&Ls, and so I had my calculator all here and my printing tape and whatever. No. All right. So accountability. We are accountable to our listeners, or really we're not.
Apparently.
We kind of lost.
After this, we're not going to have any listeners.
Well, the good news is we don't have any to begin with, so going from 0 to 0 is actually maintaining the status quo. And we always tell people if in 2020 you hold your ground.
True. It's not true. We have at least 5 listeners. I know of at least 5. At
least 5. All right. Mm-hmm. Does that count me when I listen to 30 seconds of it just to make sure that it recorded correctly, or no?
No.
Oh, wow.
So now we have 6.
No, well, yes. But I don't listen to the thing all the way through. I really don't want to listen to you again. Listening to you once is enough, Ginny.
I know. I wouldn't want to listen to me more than once either.
Now, listening to myself, that's a whole other story. I love listening to myself.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
When I get bored, I just play my own live streams on recording just to see.
To put yourself to sleep?
No, to learn. Sometimes I forget all of the wisdom that I've espoused.
Wow, you're really on a roll today.
I am. You've inspired me.
Hard time getting you out of that office with your head as big as it is.
Well, funny story. That my child's pediatrician was very concerned about the size of his head when he was very young, and was going to send him for some tests to make sure that it was okay. And then I showed up to one visit, and she walked into the room and literally took one look at me and said, "I'm not worried about his head anymore."
Are you serious?
I'm like, "Love your bedside manner, Doc."
So was he like in the 100th percentile for head size?
Yeah, well, he's in the 100th percentile for everything size-wise. I mean, he's 6'5" now, so... but yeah,
I can't believe you walked into the room and she was like, "Yep, I'm good."
Yeah. I mean, she was literally planning to send him for tests to make sure that there wasn't something growing inside his head to cause it to be so big at, age 2 or whatever. And one look at me, she was no longer worried. Well, she might have been worried, but just not in the same way.
Not about his head. Yeah.
So,
wow. Well, that's a nice compliment from the pediatrician.
Yeah. Hey, fun times. All right. Well, I think we've given the audience enough amusement for the day, and now we need to scold them. We are here to shake our fingers at you, audience members, because a lot of you complain to us about your teams, and you ask us, how can you make your teams more accountable? How can you get them to perform better? And so we're here to tell you it's not their fault, it's yours. So there.
Or just fire them all and start over. That's an option.
That is an option. I generally recommend against that. Now, I've had days where I've felt like doing that, but then you sort of start to think about it logically and realize that's probably not the best approach for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe. I mean, I'm having a day, so stay out of my way today.
Yeah, well, thank God I don't work for you.
No kidding.
More importantly, thankfully, I'm not one of your kids' teachers. So, anywho.
Yeah, that's more, yeah.
All right, so in all seriousness, though, so accountability, it needs to be a two-way street. And I think that's really what we want to talk about today, the importance as a boss of holding yourself accountable to your team just as much as you're asking them to be accountable to you and to the business.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I think back at some of the best bosses that I had and some of the best leaders that I really looked up to, and they had attributes like doing the work alongside you. And, I had one boss, I would walk in, I would get to the office early, and my cubicle was right across from her office. And she would saunter in about 10 after 9 every day, even though we were supposed to be there at 8. 10 after 9 every day. She'd walk in and she'd put her stuff down and she'd get some magazines or the newspaper out. She'd put her feet up on the desk and she'd read. And I remember, I'm like a 20-something going, wait, first of all, I've been here for 2 hours. I don't saunter in late. It was the worst kind of role model.
Right.
And then she'd come out and ask me to do something, and I'd be like, screw you. I'm not doing that for you. When there's another person over here who is working alongside me and mentoring me and showing me what to do and asking me to do things, I'm always going to put her stuff first because you're a terrible role model. And so I think about it from that perspective of what did I respect in role models, and that our mentors. And that was one of the things, was they were willing to work alongside me and actually mentor and coach and help me grow.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, leadership by example is absolutely critical. Your employees will tend to mirror your behavior. So if you are appearing to be lazy and slacking off, they're more likely to. If you appear to mistreat your subordinates, then your middle managers are likely to do the same thing because they're taking their cues from you.
Right.
So I think it's very important that you demonstrate the work ethic that you want to see from people. Now, you have to be careful that you don't carry this overboard, because sometimes you'll have a high performer who just wants to outdo you. And so you want to be careful that you don't get into an arms race, with that ambitious high performer where, all of a sudden neither one of you ever leaves the office just to try to win. Right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that's important in leadership by example is that you should never ask an employee to do something that you yourself are not willing to do. It doesn't mean that you should also be doing it. But for example, I've been in situations where the boss has said, well, I don't answer the phone. Well, why the heck not? Now, I mean, these days it's not as big a deal, but 20 years ago when, the phone was ringing off the hook in just about every business, the boss has to be willing to pick up the phone, right? You don't just sit there and let it ring because it's not your job, because that then flows down to other people. So lead by example. That's the first part of
lead by
accountability.
example. And I really like so this is actually a very hard lesson that I had to learn, because I had a business coach several years ago, and he was great for me because he would not take he took no excuses. But he did an evaluation of my team, and it came back that I expected them to work 24/7. And I didn't expect them to work 24/7. I didn't. I was like, that's ridiculous. Why would they say that? And what we discovered is it was because I did. I worked 24/7. And because of that, even though I was saying to them, I don't expect that my actions were proving differently.
Right.
And I remember him saying to me, he worked for Bank of America. He was a big wig there. And he said, one of the things, I was never done at 5:00 ever. But one of the things that I did is at, 5 after 5, I would make a show of packing all my stuff up, putting on my coat, getting everything in my briefcase, turning my lights off and leaving. He said what I ended up doing is I'd go to the second floor where there was a shared conference room, and I'd set up shop in there, but nobody knew that he was there, and he could continue working and get his stuff done. But everybody assumed he had left. And so then they felt safe leaving as well. Right. And I thought that story has always resonated with me from an accountability standpoint, because I think accountability falls on both sides. It's what do you expect, what kind of behavior do you expect, and what are you demonstrating that's different from what you expect?
Right. And and obviously these days where most people are not in offices, it's you don't have to play these charades quite as much.
Sure.
But it does come down to things like email and not sending email at all hours, and at the same time being responsive. So you want to make sure that you're not appearing like you're sleeping in until noon every day because you never respond to a Slack message or email before noon. Right. So even if you really are sleeping till noon, maybe wake up briefly at 9:15 or so, send a couple of replies, and go back to sleep. There are ways.
Schedule messages. Schedule them.
Yeah, you can schedule them, but there are ways to make yourself. I mean, even in an office environment, there are ways where, as an owner, you can still take the flexibility to perhaps not be in the office the normal hours, but not do it in such a way that it rubs the employees' faces in it. Right? It's better not to be in the office. Maybe make it seem like you're out at a meeting or something, as opposed to coming in, putting your feet up on the desk, and reading, which. That's probably about the worst approach you can take, either as an employee or as an owner or anything.
It was terrible.
Yeah, that's
not terrible.
Good. That's not good. No, we don't like that.
And I will say that even though as part of our jobs, especially as communicators, it is to read, I carried that all the way through. And when I would see employees sitting at their desk reading, I would just, it was not good for me.
Right.
And I had to come to terms with that personally, but that was a trigger for me because of that boss. So yeah, I mean, if she was expecting more out of me, she was not getting more out of me just because I was being a stubborn little shit and not doing what she wanted, because she wasn't demonstrating that she was willing to do what I needed to help grow my career.
Right. Well, and I think one of the challenges too that a lot of new managers in particular have is that if they look out at their team and they see the team is not performing up to par, they sort of they feel like they need to turn into the drill sergeant and just say, more, give me 10, that didn't work. Well, now you're going to run 20 laps, or sort of you see the same thing out of new sports coaches, right? They tend to skew in that direction, the more authoritarian approach, when in reality, I think a key part of accountability as a boss, manager, owner, or whatever, is that you need to see yourself as someone who is breaking down the obstacles for your team. So,
Right.
Instead of seeing your team as the enemy and the group that you're trying to move, look on the other side of your team and figure out what's in their way. What can you do to sort of be their blocking back, to use an American football term, to clear a path for them. And that may be more training. It may be taking dumb stuff off their plates that's not productive use of their time. It may mean increasing the size of the team. It may mean working with clients to set better expectations. There are so many different things that it could be, but it's your job as the owner, boss, or manager to figure out what those things are and break those down rather than breaking your team down.
Well, and we talked in last week's episode about tools and systems and software processes to help you do some of that. And it may very well be that there isn't a process, or that you have expectations in your head that you haven't articulated out loud so that people know what they are, what process they're supposed to follow. And we are big, huge fans of co-schedule here, but we had one employee a couple of years ago who hated it, and she wouldn't do her job because she couldn't figure out co-schedule. And that frustrated me, I'm going to be honest. But then I realized that it was just because she couldn't figure out how to use it. And so we got her some training, some professional development on it. And then she became one of the biggest fans of using it. But yeah, it was pretty stressful there for a little bit, because I was like, it's not hard. It's a calendar. Just update it.
Right. Well, and as always, a lot of this comes back to communication. Right, because part of being accountable is making sure that you have those open lines of communication so that your team can express their concerns or frustrations, or that you can pick them up just because you're having those conversations. But it also, from a communication standpoint, it means that you need to let the team in on not just what your expectations are, but also, perhaps helping to explain why your expectations are what they are. Now, this doesn't mean that you've got a democracy now and you should let the team decide what's going to happen, and you're still the boss. You still get to make the final decision. But having that kind of a conversation where you say, look, we need to be, at 80% billable hours, because that's how we hit the profit margins, which is how we pay you, which is how you get your bonuses. So if you walk them through the logic behind things, that can often help. And it may also help them say, well, but here's the flaw in your reasoning. And who knows? You may actually change your mind. You may not, but if you haven't been accountable enough to have that conversation, you never have the opportunity to decide whether to act upon an additional data point.
We've talked about this before, and you make fun of me about it, but I go back to this a lot, where all of us who have had at some point small children who ask the question why constantly, why. And I will ask my small child to do something, and her first response, no matter what, is why. Oh my gosh, just
it's infuriating.
Do it.
It is.
Yep. It's infuriating. But when you think about it from the perspective of an employee, giving them the rationalization and the understanding of why, I think is really valuable, because then they go, oh, you're not just bossing me around. There's actually a reason for it. So I think, to your point, showing them the reasons that you're doing these things, and why it's what your expectations are and what the outcome is extraordinarily helpful. Now,
Right.
if they continue to ask why, then you can probably get a little frustrated, but
Well, if they ask why about the exact same thing, but
yeah,
it's I think that and even with kids, it's actually valuable to give them those answers because kids are learning, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely,
that's the
yeah,
whole nature of growing up, and hopefully
yep,
employees are doing the same. Hopefully, we're doing the same as leaders, right? You need
yep,
to
yep.
constantly be learning and evolving, and if you ever reach a point where you think you have all the answers, you probably ought to get out of whatever it is that you're doing because
Right, right.
that you don't. I guarantee it. And I'm constantly reevaluating my own recommendations to
Of
clients or
course, of
that sort
course.
of thing
Yep.
because you just gather additional information. You see what works, what doesn't, or maybe someone shares a better way of doing something. So you say,
Yeah.
well, look,
Yeah.
hey, that's a better
Hey,
mousetrap. Let's
that's a
go buy
cool
that
way.
one,
Yeah.
or a rat
Yep.
trap in your case. But
I have them controlled. They are under
the
control.
rats are under control.
They might be all dead, but that's one way to do it. The same business coach that I mentioned earlier, during coaching sessions, he would say to me, "Well, what do you think?" And it infuriated me because I'd be like, "The reason I'm asking you is because I don't know." But he would never give me the answer. And I've noticed in my own leadership and in my parenting, I do that too, where she'll say, "Well, why?" And I'll say, "Why do you think?" And then for my 7-year-old, it helps her think through and create critical thinking skills, right? But for my team, it helps them go, "Oh, well, I don't know." And then they start to think about it from a different perspective.
Right.
And you can steer that conversation, of course. But my first question is, "Well, what do you think?" Or "Why do you think?" And then they stop always and go, I don't know. And it
Hmm.
is infuriating because sometimes you're like, "I don't know, just give me the answer."
Right.
But I think it helps for that, why I can't get my employees to do more. It creates that accountability because now they understand why it is and what their role is in getting that result.
Yep. Yeah, and it's sometimes you just have to change your expectations too, right? I think we've talked about
Sure,
that recently as well. I mean,
sure.
you're never going to find team members who work as long, as hard, as well,
Right,
and all of that
right.
as you do. It's not. They are different. Employees are different
Yep,
from owners, and
yep.
so sometimes you do have to take a look at that and say, the problem isn't with the team. It's with what I'm expecting of the team. But if you really aren't getting what is reasonable to expect from them, then it really is you need to be the one who's then asking why, right?
Right.
So you have to be open to the employees asking why, but if you're not seeing what you want, then ask them why, and keep probing because chances are the first answer to why is not the true answer,
Almost
right?
always. Yeah, almost
The
always.
first answer is the diplomatic one, the one where
Right.
they're most likely not to offend you and all that. But if you probe and dig deeper, you will ultimately get to what the actual problem is. And if you know what the real challenge is, then you can come up with a much better solution, and that's how you ultimately get better performance. It's not by putting in new quotas for performance or putting in arbitrary guidelines for the amount of hours you have to spend on certain things, or and those are all normal behavior. So if you've done that, don't be ashamed. We've all done that at one point or another, where we just insist that this task should take no more than 2 hours to do. Don't spend a minute more than that. Well, that's fantastic until they spend 2 hours and turn in a piece of rubbish,
Right,
because
right,
it really wasn't enough.
right.
And so you need to then figure out why. And if you figure those things out, you will get better performance. It's not an overnight thing. And I think that's the
No.
other piece of being accountable is you need to be realistic about how long it takes to steer the ship. The larger your team is, the longer it's going to take. And so you need to have ideas in mind as to how you can break down those barriers, but then also realistic timelines for how to get to the performance that you ultimately need and expect.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not an overnight success kind of thing. And even just changing your own language and your own habits, that takes a while. I mean, what do they say? It's at least 90 days to make a habit.
Right.
So you're looking at probably a 6-month length of time to just to change your own behavior, let alone that of your team.
Right. And this is also where it can be helpful to to ask others for help, right? And it's a big challenge for agency owners because they don't often have people to talk to, but talk to other agency owners, talk to a
Yep.
coach like you did. Talk to someone who can help you do that reality check on your expectations, who can perhaps talk through the challenge that you're having and help you figure out the right questions to ask of your team to figure out what are those problems. But the key piece to remember is that the team at the end of the day is a reflection of you. It's either underperforming because you've brought the wrong people in, because you haven't given them the tools they need to succeed, because you have the wrong expectations, whatever. But it ultimately circles back to you. So don't go into it with the idea that you're pointing the finger outward. You need to point it inward, and that's how you'll find the long-term solution to the challenge.
Amen.
And that concludes our short-term challenge, which was getting this episode recorded without Ginny completely losing it.
I did it.
We are so very proud of you, Ginny.
Thank you. I
Beyond
appreciate
words.
it.
Beyond words.
Thank you. Yeah.
And this would be one of those cases where I've had to adjust my expectations for my co-host. They are now.
I love that you're like, I'm just gonna sit back here and wait. You let me know when you're ready. And then it took me a couple minutes.
I'm still stunned we managed to get this entire episode recorded. So the fact that we did is great. If you're still listening at this point, if you're one of those 5 listeners and you made it all the way through here, we really do appreciate it. And we will try to be. No, I'm not even going to bother. We're not going.
Yeah, listen. If I make it through the rest of this year without a straitjacket, it's going to be a miracle.
This is what it is. I mean, we were off the rails before the pandemic, and now we don't even know where the rails are anymore, folks. So
there aren't any. It's just what it is.
So with that, we will move on with our lives, with our work weeks, and see you back here next week. I'm Chip Griffin,
and I'm Jenny Dietrich.
And it depends. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. Let's try this again, shall we, Jenny? What in the hell were you doing?
I was going to grab some different headphones and then you started.
Go ahead, grab your other headphones.
No, it's okay. It's fine. I'm not moving.
Okay, let's try this start again. Oh, I may use this as a blooper reel at the end, but anyway. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jenny.
I'm just going to sit back here, have a little drink. You let me know when you're ready, okay?
Okay. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm having a time. Okay, I'm ready.
You sure?
Yes.